slips her belt in 2A. The eviction begins. Ticket mix-up, ma'am. Move to coach. Kicked out of business the second she sits for the color of her skin, she doesn't raise her voice. She raises evidence. Scan it. 3 steps to the reader. 1 cabin holding its breath. Then the man in 3A stands, slides a business card onto the bin, and the air tilts. Who is he? What will one beep decide, seat or surrender, courtesy or dignity? Stay to the end. In 15 minutes, proof will challenge a polished excuse, and the smallest sound on the plane may rewrite everything. Eleanor Brooks drops into 2A, and the belt clicks home, a neat sound with the confidence of a period. Her cardigan settles on her shoulders. The reading light paints a clean stripe along the armrest. In her palm, a pill pouch taps once, a quiet drum telling her to breathe in and hold and let go. The window shows a wash of runway and late morning glare. She takes one more steady breath, the way her doctor taught, not to brace for trouble, but to make a little space for calm. The aisle inhales. A blue uniform appears, crisp as a folded flag. The smile that comes with it is bright and far away, the kind of smile that lives behind glass. Ma'am, we have a ticket mix-up. I need you to move to coach. The words arrive fast, practiced, ready to redirect. Eleanor offers her boarding pass. You can scan it again, she says, voice low and even. She has trained it to step past insult and land on fact. The uniform leans in until Eleanor can see the tiny stitches climbing the collar. This row is intended for customers who are more appropriate for the cabin. Appropriate floats down like feather ash, soft at first, then heavy as it gathers in her chest. She has met that word in doctor rooms where questions were answered to the ceiling. She met it in an interview where she was called seasoned with a tone that meant already over. Appropriate is a fence made of manners and placed exactly where you need a door. She looks at the pass again. Her name. First. 2A. Ink. Payment. Contract. Not a favor. She lifts the pass into the cone of light as if she were holding a small truth up to the sun. Scan it, she says again. Behind her a zipper slides and someone whispers, let them check it. A second voice answers, do not make trouble. The cabin holds both sentences the way weather holds heat and cold at once. In 3A, a man adjusts his cuff and watches through the mirror sheen of his phone. The engines breathe shallow, as if the jet itself is waiting to see which story will win. We have to avoid delays, the attendant says. If you cooperate, we can get everyone on their way. Under the varnish, the message sharpens. Give up quietly. Call it grace. Eleanor hears it and lets it pass like wind against a closed window. She thinks of the price of inches. She taught nights, wiped whiteboards until her hands smelled like dust, sold wedding china that used to mean forever. She bought legroom because her back locks when the angle is wrong. She bought a few inches of mercy for knees that have carried decades. She bought a rival with enough dignity to stand upright. The pill pouch clicks again. She sets her shoulders not in defiance but in alignment, the small posture of someone keeping faith with herself. The pass remains between them, a thin rectangle of data ignored. Appropriate hangs in the air like a curtain set too low, cutting the view into the sliver that flatters a story. Eleanor remembers a grocery aisle where a stranger insisted on carrying her milk and looked disappointed when she thanked him without surrender. She remembers a supervisor who explained a spreadsheet as if she were the spreadsheet. Those memories do not burn. They accumulate, a quiet sediment. Scan it, she says a third time, softer now and somehow edged with steel. The device that could answer is 3 steps away, a small reader, a small beep, a gate to facts. The plane tilts its attention toward the possibility of sound. A bin door closes somewhere behind them, metal on metal. A child coughs and is hushed. The air thins the way a theater does, one breath before the curtain lifts. We follow procedure, the attendant says, and places a hand on the overhead as if swearing on a book, but the book has not been opened. Procedure without a scan is a wall drawn in chalk. Eleanor does not raise her voice. She tips the pass so the barcode catches the light and sits there in perfect focus. Let the scanner speak, she says. Her breath keeps its count. 4 and 4 and 6. Her left knee reminds her of the stairs she climbed last week. Warmth at her spine tells her the seat cradles what it should. She notes the hum in the galley, the press of gravity, the way the armrest feels firm and promised under her palm. She is aware that sitting here is ordinary and contested at once, as if a door had been installed in the middle of a sidewalk and someone now argued that sidewalks are for the young. The seconds lengthen. The smile across from her does not unfreeze, but something shifts behind it, a calculation that prefers a script to a line of print. Eleanor watches with a calm that is not softness. The pill pouch taps again, light as a knock that asks one question and waits for only one thing. Will the machine sing? Will truth be allowed to make its small sound? Will a single beat carry a woman forward or push her back into a narrow row with her name folded into someone else's idea of order? Scan it, Eleanor says once more, no louder than before, and somehow final. The cabin holds its breath. The reader is 3 steps away. The light is steady. The pass is in the light. All that remains is a hand to bridge the distance and a sound no longer than a heartbeat to decide which story this plane will carry into the air. The cabin carried the hush that arrives before judgment, when everyone pretends to read and no one is reading. Maya Thompson walked into that hush with a scanner in her hand, a rectangle of light that wanted only to tell the truth. A call had brought her up the aisle because the woman in 2A had been told to move. The request already wore the polite clothes of inevitability and the smile that asks a person to step aside. Maya felt the pull where speed tugs one way and accuracy tugs the other, and she put her weight where facts live. She lifted the boarding pass and let the barcode settle under the lamp until the black lines looked steady enough to sing. Point, beat, fact, the device answered, opening a little window with words that mattered. First in large letters, 2, a larger still, and the name Eleanor Brooks, spelled exactly as at the gate. The moment steadied like a table with its 4th leg set right, and Maya planted both feet. Boarding pass is valid, she said, assigned to this seat. Karen Walsh's smile did not move, living at the corners of her mouth like something pinned in place. The gate needs us to push back, she said. We have to avoid delays. Words that sounded laminated and practiced. The information glowing on Maya's screen did not seem to enter the air, so she turned it to the light and repeated, valid, logged in the system. Ryan Clark stepped from the forward galley, first officer by the silver bars and the way the aisle made room for him. To avoid delays, he said, we will seat the passenger in the back and sort it later, and later rang like a coin on metal. Maya felt the tug between schedule and truth, and remembered training that drew a triangle marked safety service schedule. The instructor had tapped the center and said balance, not a slogan, but a choice made where hurry meets duty. Sir, the boarding pass is correct, she said, keeping her voice even and letting the data fill the aisle. She pictured the woman in 2A in the careful posture of someone protecting her back for the walk after landing. That was what the extra inches were for. Not champagne, but knees, spines, breathing, ordinary dignity. Ryan did not look at the screen and said procedure is to keep the operation moving. We will fix the system error once airborne. Karen nodded, a small agreement that looked practiced, and heat climbed under Maya's ribs before she named it and let it pass. Anger is a spark, proof is a light, she told herself, then held the device where no one could pretend not to see. The numbers shone like street signs that refused to lie, 1st and 2 a steady beneath the lamp. The beat was not loud, but it was lawful, and the cabin leaned toward it and then away like a tide choosing a move. A man in 3A shifted. A child retrieved a stuffed bear. A woman closed her book without marking the page. We have to push, Ryan said. Every minute on the ground is a minute lost in the air, an equation offered as law. Maya thought of other math. Minutes now prevent apologies later. Seconds of proof prevent hours of grievance. She pictured the report after landing, the line for reason, the box for log image, the space for how it was explained. She refused to let fog fill those spaces and met Karen's eyes with a sentence waiting for its own breath. The customer was told the seat is inappropriate. Maya said, that is not a reason. We have a scan, a name, a seat. Her voice balanced on a wire, and hands stayed steady. She was not performing. She was pointing at the light. Ryan lifted a hand toward the rear as if directing traffic only he could see, and Maya stepped a half-pace forward. The scanner hung between them like a small lighthouse, insisting on naming what stands before it. The cabin became a court without a bench. evidence glowing while the verdict kept glancing at the clock. The engines hummed. The wing held a pale stripe of late sun, and a soft chorus of travel gathered. Just move her, someone murmured. They know what they are doing. Someone else answered, hurry up, slow down, sentences canceling one another. Maya felt how easy it would be to soften, to call it a mix-up and invite grace. She also felt the weight of the screen, the way truth asks for little room yet occupies the whole space once invited. We will reseat the passenger, Ryan said, looking past the display as if looking past the sun. Maya did not move and said, sir, the seat is hers, and the word hers seemed to touch the armrest and stay. The woman in 2A did not speak, waiting with the poise of someone who knows patience can be louder than a shout. The cockpit door clicked from the other side, a sound as small as a knuckle on wood and as large as a verdict. Heads tilted, the aisle opened by instinct, and Maya held the scanner steady as the light found the barcode once more. She stood ready for the note that might change everything or be ignored again by people who prefer speed to evidence. The future gathered behind that door the way weather gathers behind clouds on a runway, close, heavy, choosing when to break. The next sound would decide which story this flight would tell and which silence the passengers would carry after landing. The aisle held its breath. The scanner's little screen glowed in Maya's hand, a square of daylight inside the dim cabin, and for a moment the whole flight seemed to balance on that pale blue light. Ryan kept talking about minutes and pushback and on-time performance. Karen's smile stayed where it always lived, courteous and untouchable, as if kindness could be worn like a badge. Eleanor sat steady in 2A, shoulders level, eyes clear, the pill pouch resting on her lap like a small clock that kept only one appointment. Breathe. In 3A, the man with the open collar finally stood. He did it without theater, without the rustle of somebody trying to be noticed. He opened the overhead, reached past his carry-on, and took out a slim leather wallet, the edges softened by use. He didn't fan anything in the air or clear his throat for effect. He set a business card on the lip of the bin where the reading light could find it, and let the print become part of the scene. The name was plain and exact. Daniel Brooks. The title under it was the kind people assume only exists on websites. Chief Executive Officer, North Star Airline. No gasp, no chorus. The reaction was smaller, more honest. A turning of heads, a stiffness in Ryan's jaw that looked like calculation running out of space. Karen's smile flickered, then held. Maya looked from the card to the scanner and back, as if to confirm that two versions of truth had just met in the same aisle. Daniel didn't reach for drama. He looked at the words on Maya's screen, then at Eleanor, then at the crew who had been speaking in the fluent language of policy. He sounded like a person asking for the check. I fly my own routes without advance notice, he said, so I can see what customers actually live through. The passenger in 2A is my mother. It wasn't a trumpet. It was a key turning in a lock. Karen recovered first. Sir, please don't misrepresent your identity to create pressure. She meant it to sound careful and firm. It sounded like a door closing on a fact, because the room preferred the window. Maya opened her mouth, but the cockpit door tapped once against its latch and swung outward. The relief captain stepped into the aisle, uniform calm, hair neatly silver at the temples. He took in the card, the scanner, the straightness of Daniel's posture, the straightness of Eleanor's. Good afternoon, Mr. Brooks, he said. The confirmation landed with no extra weight, like a gavel that didn't need to be heavy to be final. Everything that had been fuzzy snapped into focus. The silence changed shape. It stopped being a hush and became attention. Daniel inclined his head toward Maya as if they had been carrying a plank together and she had taken most of the weight. Thank you for scanning, he said. Facts deserve the first word, not the last. He turned to the crew. No one gets blamed for an honest mistake, but when you skip the scan, you stop following procedure and start guessing. We don't guess with seats people pay for. We don't guess with dignity. Ryan started to answer. He reached for delay the way a person grabs a handrail when the floor moves, and then seemed to feel the uselessness of it. The scanner in Maya's hand blinked without apology. First, 2A, Eleanor Brooks. There are sentences that cannot be talked around. You can only step toward them or away. Maya took a half step toward them. Mrs. Brooks, please return to 2A. Her voice had the ease of a door that fits its frame. Eleanor rose with care, a body earns. As she passed, she placed her palm on the armrest, not like a claim, but like a promise kept. She sat. The belt clicked with the soft certainty of a period at the end of a hard-won sentence. Nothing grand happened. No applause. The plane did not burst into redemption. What changed was smaller and more durable. Karen's expression lost its showroom shine and found something plainer. A look that suggested she had finally seen the piece of herself that had been steering. Brian's shoulders loosened as if he had been bracing against a wind that turned out to be inside him. Maya saved the image of the scan and typed a note so clear a stranger could understand it after midnight. Daniel slipped his card back into the wallet like a tool returned to its shelf. He spoke once more, not louder, just closer to the center. Respect isn't a perk we hand out when it's convenient. It's standard equipment. If we can't rely on the scan before we rely on our instincts, we're not running an airline. We're running opinions at 30,000 feet. The jet backed away from the gate with the easy shove of ground power. The wing caught a bar of late sun and held it. A child in row 5 whispered that the service trucks looked like toys. Somewhere behind them, a passenger who had wanted everyone to hurry realized what had almost been lost. Not time, but the thin thread of trust that lets strangers go strap themselves into a metal tube and believe that rules will hold. Daniel leaned toward his mother with the quiet that privacy makes out of thin air. "You okay?" he asked. She smiled without triumph. "I'm fine. I'll remember." He nodded, more son than executive now, and sat back. His eyes closed for a second as if to file the day in a place where it would not go missing. The engines gathered their tone, low to high, the way a heart moves when a decision is finally clean. The cabin rolled forward. Phone screens went dark. Books reopened to the same paragraph. Breath returned to the register people use when they trust the floor. Outside, the runway stretched like a long sentence reaching for its verb. Inside, the question that had owned the aisle receded and left behind a different one, quieter and harder. When the pressure rises again somewhere else, when another uniform thinks speed is the same as right, when another older passenger meets the word appropriate dressed as courtesy, will the next person in the aisle choose the beat or the story? The wheels lifted. The ground fell away. The cabin stayed very still, as if waiting to see which answer would follow them into the sky. The room felt pressure sealed, a square of air held in place by glass and expectation, and Daniel Brooks stood at the end of the table with a dry erase marker like a captain holding a checklist he intended to complete. Maya's scanner rested beside her notebook, a modest lighthouse washing the laminate with faint blue. Karen folded her hands so tightly that the knuckles whitened. Brian sat upright, as if turbulence could be outstared. HR had taken the far chairs. Legal had brought a box of files whose tabs whispered dates and times. Outside the window, a fuselage slid past in slow motion, a reminder that the world still moved while this room decided what it believed about itself. Operations reviewed the timeline with the cadence of a metronome. Gate time stamped to the minute, boarding complete. A polite phrase delivered like silk covering a needle, appropriate. The word returned to the room and went from soft to heavy in 3 heartbeats. Daniel didn't look at the word, he looked at the log. Maya brought it up again, and the barcode appeared like a road at high noon. First, 2A, Eleanor Brooks. The image clicked into the case file, and the sound was small and final, the digital version of a seatbelt sliding home. Karen spoke first, voice trained to calm, eyes careful. The cabin was tight. The clock was against us. The phrasing about appropriateness was intended to preserve tone. Daniel's answer was gentle and uncompromising. Tone is only useful when it frames the truth. Without the scan, tone is theater. He turned to Ryan. The first officer spoke toward the clock. Each minute on the ground can cascade through an afternoon of connections. My job is to keep the operation moving. Daniel moved the marker once and wrote 2 words on the board and underlined them. Moving right. Maya's voice carried no performance, just the steadiness of someone who has learned to let data hold the room. Evidence was available in real time. The customer was older. The seat was chosen for physical reasons spelled out in the customer history. We had a way to anchor the decision. We didn't use it. The building's HVAC sighed as if the ducts had opinions. Daniel let silence expand until it felt like a measurement. He looked at Karen and softened his tone without loosening it. I don't punish honest mistakes, but this wasn't a stumble. It was a detour around proof. Then he faced Ryan and let the whiteboard speak behind him. Safety is our crown word, but safety that leaps over verification isn't safety. It's hurry dressed up to look responsible. The union rep asked for fairness, and Daniel nodded. Fairness is the reason we are naming things exactly. He lifted his hand toward Maya's scanner, the small lantern that kept returning the room to daylight. This is not an accessory. This is the beginning of every judgment. Then he swallowed the easiest path and walked the harder one. Effective immediately, you are both removed from the line pending review and retraining. If this was a single lapse, we will repair it with coaching and pattern checks. If it is a habit, we will separate. The sentence landed without flourish and rearranged the oxygen. Karen unclipped her badge as if it were glass. Ryan stared at his reflection in the tabletop until the outline broke, then lifted his eyes and let the first true thing he had said all afternoon escape almost by accident. I thought speed was virtue, Daniel answered without triumph. Speed is good service only when it is anchored by proof. Maya signed the incident summary and attached the image of the scan, then added one clean sentence about how the situation had been explained to the customer. The keystroke was a promise disguised as a click. HR slid 2 envelopes across the table, the tidy language of accountability folded into legal paper. Karen's mouth trembled and steadied. Ryan's shoulders lost 2 degrees of defiance. Daniel capped the marker, and the word he had written above the board felt less like a slogan and more like an instrument panel finding level. Respect first. He thanked Maya in a voice not meant for an audience, a simple acknowledgement that looked like a bridge laid between 2 points. Keep insisting on the scan. It should never have to argue for its place. Gossip tried to beat the elevators downstairs, as gossip always does, dressing itself in extra colors it never earned. What moved slower, stubborn, and useful was the other story, the one written into schedules and briefings and quiet choices. The overnight desk printed a memo that fit on a single page and didn't waste any of it. Scan, verify, record. Post-flight, log the reason and the alternative offered. The supervisors underlined record and pinned the page by the coffee machine where everyone's hands would pass. Somewhere a trainer gave a morning lecture and inserted a slide with a sentence that didn't sound heroic and so was more likely to be remembered. Evidence before instinct. He told a story without names about a seat and a word and a small beat that turned a conflict into a fact. He did not mention the title on a business card because the point was that the card should never have been needed. Eleanor knew none of this. She woke early, poured hot water over a tea bag until the kitchen smelled like warmth itself, and pressed one finger into the oak back of her chair the way she had pressed her palm to the armrest, a test of presence. A small ceremony of remaining. Across town, Maya opened an envelope in her mailbox and found a note in clean handwriting and a pin as light as proof. For insisting on the scan. Wear this where you can feel it. She tucked it on the inside seam of her blazer where her fingertips could find it before a difficult conversation. Karen stood in HR under a framed poster of mountains that promised perspective and signed the kind of paperwork that talks about options and reads like endings. Ryan set his badge on the desk he would not return to and stayed very still until the silence stopped feeling like punishment and started feeling like time. By late afternoon, a different gate filled with ordinary noises and unremarked kindness. A customer asked a small, inconvenient question. The agent reached for the scanner before she reached for her smile. The device chirped, a syllable no louder than a shoe on tile, and the next 5 minutes chose a better shape. In the conference room upstairs, the whiteboard still carried 2 words in black ink and the ghost of the underlines, and the air felt a fraction cleaner, like a cabin that had exchanged stale for fresh. Daniel stood alone for a moment and looked at the empty chairs and the capped marker and the log file open on the screen, ordinary artifacts made noble by use. Then he turned out the lights and left the room to hold its promise until morning. Down in the terminal, a child asked if planes had horns and was told no, only beeps, and even those are small. A good thing, the parent said, because the smallest sound can still decide the story. Somewhere on the concourse, a scanner lifted. A barcode found the light, and the cliff between hurry and dignity waited for the next pair of hands to build the bridge. Midnight folded over headquarters and left the glass walls reflecting back the people inside. Someone had wiped the board so hard the felt had ghosted into the enamel, and Daniel Brooks wrote 2 words across the blank: respect first. The marker squeaked once, a sound too small for the scale of what he wanted to change. He looked at his team the way a pilot looks at instruments before a night departure. Not for drama, for alignment. We start with proof, and we stay human, he said. Every dispute gets scanned, verified, recorded. With older customers, we meet at eye level. We speak fully. We propose before we impose. If doubt shows up, we call a supervisor or relief crew instead of filling the gap with our own certainty. And bias training won't be a quarterly slideshow. It will be a habit we can be graded on. By dawn, the plan had a pulse. IT pushed an update that added an Eleanor prompt to the app, a bright line that asked for a photo of the pass and a 1-sentence explanation in plain English before any seat change. Supervisors received a call button that rang a real person, not a maze. In training rooms, the slides had been rewritten, so the examples were not about glamorous upgrades, but about knees that swell and backs that go rigid at the wrong angle. The rollout felt less like a launch and more like a course correction. A wheel turned a few degrees that would over miles draw an entirely different route. Weather came in with a long gray shoulder and slumped over the airport. At Gate 22, a red eye filled with raincoats and carry-ons and the hope of sleep, and then the scanners blinked and went dark. The outage crept from kiosk to counter, like a rumor dressing itself as fact. Tech sent a brief notice that felt like a shrug. The first real test, the kind no one schedules, arrived without knocking. Jo Perez was new enough to still count checklists under her breath and old enough to know when a smile was being used as a curtain. She held the dead scanner the way a lifeguard holds a radio that won't call the tower, and reminded herself that discipline is not a device. An older man leaned into the counter, careful on a cane polished by years of hands. His paper boarding pass read 1C in block letters. A second traveler stepped up with a phone that glowed the same seat number. Both men looked certain in different ways. Jo felt time pulling at her sleeve. She knelt to meet the older man's eyes. "Mr. Alvarez, I see 1C on your pass," she said, measuring each word. "For your knee, we'll keep you near the front. May I propose 2A? While I confirm the manifest." She stood, called the relief captain, and asked for the paper list the way a ranger asks for a compass when the GPS loses the sky. Proper authority, not invented certainty. The businessman's impatience sharpened. "I have meetings before sunrise," he said, as if the day were a badge that made him heavier. Jo held his gaze without heat. "We will seat you correctly, and we will not guess." She lifted her phone and took photos of both passes, wrote the time in ink on a small card, and kept her voice steady enough to calm the people who were listening. The captain arrived with a clipboard that looked outdated until it mattered. The manifest showed a late scheduled change that had pushed Mr. Alvarez into 1C while a partner system lagged behind. A ghost seat printed on a screen that would have won on an ordinary day. Jo offered the businessman a warm drink in the aisle across the row. He started to argue, saw the cane, and stopped as if catching his own reflection. Mr. Alvarez settled into 1C like a man who has worked for decades to keep his balance and would like to keep it for one more night. The cabin softened by a degree. Across the building, the outage lit Daniel's dashboard, the color of storm water. He did not call the gate to be seen. Culture was what people did when they thought no one important was watching. He sent a single line to the network channel, paper procedurals in effect, photo and log. He watched as timestamps stacked in the shared file, each note a small anchor against drift. The respect score, still a twitching newborn, remained visible on a second screen. It dipped in punctuality and climbed in something softer that had never been measured before. Customers saying thank you without being asked. Before noon, a message arrived from legal with the quiet urgency of good news that could have been bad. The paper manifest at another gate had prevented a code share mismatch that would have lifted a wheelchair passenger to the wrong city. The new ritual had not only guarded dignity, it had caught a technical seam the old habit would have missed. Systems change when one law binds the rest, Daniel wrote back. Evidence before instinct. The weather burned off and the scanners woke with cheerful beeps, small heartbeats rejoining the larger body. Gate 22's log read like clean stitches. Photos, times, reasons, alternatives offered. The language of respect written, where anyone could audit it at midnight and find no need for translation. Jo closed her shift with shoulders a little lower and hands still steady. In her locker, a thin envelope waited, with a note in clean black handwriting and a pin the size of a coin, for insisting on proof when the machines went quiet. Wear it where you can feel it. Night returned. The terminal became a string of small lanterns, and a child pressed his nose to the glass and asked if airplanes had horns. His mother smiled and said they have beeps, and sometimes the beeps are tiny and mean more than you think. Upstairs, Daniel stood alone in the training room and looked at the words on the board, the ink already drying into a promise. He listened for what would come next. Not a clamor, not applause, just that quiet, decisive sound that says a choice has been made. Somewhere out on the concourse, a scanner lifted, a barcode found the light, and a beep rose like a semaphore into the evening. The story was still being written, but the ending had lost one of its darker possibilities. The next test was already taxiing toward them. He welcomed it. By the time the posters appeared on the jet bridges, the promise had already been tested in ugly weather and on tired nights. The Eleanor Standard dignity in every seat wasn't a slogan slapped over a bruise. It was a set of small behaviors that had survived their first hard day. The type was plain. The photo was just a hand on an armrest. Below it, we see you. We scan. We care. Nothing heroic, just instructions, and the humility to follow them. In training, the changes were smaller than people expected and therefore easier to keep. Agents practiced how to meet an older customer at eye level without bending into pity. They traded, "We'll see what we can do for. Here's what will happen next, and here's a real alternative if you prefer." Supervisors learned to treat the scanner as the first witness, not the last resort. And every seat move now left a trail, an image of the pass, a time stamp, a sentence in plain English explaining why. The respect survey went out to customers 60 and older after each flight. 3 questions, no flattery, and the respect score climbed and dipped on a dashboard that refused to be sentimental. The test that wrote itself into memory came on a Tuesday with clear skies and a crowded bank of departures. Lena, a new attendant with quick hands and a calm voice, watched an older woman settle into 2A the way a careful driver eases into a parking spot that took a while to find. The woman wore comfortable shoes and carried a pill pouch that clicked softly against her palm. A seat change ping arrived from ops, vague as fog and just as persuasive. An elite traveler had needs, the note said, a word that often tries to pass for law. Lena felt the old temptation to solve the problem by moving the person least likely to fight. She didn't. She pressed the Eleanor button on her tablet and let the steps narrow her choices. Scan. Verify. Record. She scanned the 2A pass and saw first Mrs. Avery, noted the medical flag for limited mobility, saved the image. Then she walked to row 3 and met the elite traveler, shiny shoes, tight schedule, the stress of living all the way at the edge of his day. She explained exactly what the system was asking for and exactly why it would not happen without evidence. She offered a specific, decent alternative and promised to hold his coat while he stowed his bag. He bristled and then, almost against his will, looked at the woman in 2A. He saw the pill pouch. He saw the way she kept one hand curled on the armrest, steadying her back. Something in him let go of the speed he had been mistaking for gravity. He took the alternative seat. Lena logged the reason and the offer both. None of this made the evening news. What it made was a clean note in a system that used to hum with excuses. Later that night, the survey landed on Mrs. Avery's phone. Were you addressed at eye level? Was the reason specific? Did you leave feeling seen? She answered yes, yes, and yes. She added a single sentence. I didn't need special treatment. I needed my rightful seat. In Daniel's office, the respect score ticked up a fraction of a point. He wasn't chasing numbers. He was watching for drift. When the graph sagged the next week at a different station, the logs told the story without drama. No pass images, vague language, the old music creeping back, no angry memo, no grandstanding. He called the station manager and asked for one thing, a scan and a sentence for every dispute. By Friday, the dots turned green again. not because people were afraid, but because the work was simple enough to repeat and honest enough to respect. The program kept proving itself in places that never get credit. A code share hiccup tried to double book a bulkhead seat, and the paper manifest revived for contingencies caught it before a wheelchair customer was pushed into a compromise dressed up as kindness. A night shift agent, new and nervous, followed the script so faithfully that an impatient line relaxed into something like community. And a captain who had once thought procedure was a word for slowing down found himself telling a room full of pilots that the beep, the boring little beep, was the sound of safety and respect arriving at the same time. Weeks later, Eleanor walked the concourse with the unhurried pace of someone who has paid for the right not to rush. She stopped at a poster near a ficus that needed more water and touched the glass the way she had touched the armrest that first day. A young agent greeted her at eye level and asked if warm water would help her throat. Eleanor smiled and said she was fine. The young agent scanned her pass without being asked. The beep was small. The meaning wasn't. If there was a moral, it lived in ordinary sentences. Respect is not a feeling on a good day. It's a behavior on a hard one. Systems don't change because someone famous makes a speech. They change because people like Lena and Maya and a dozen others choose to scan over the story and write down what they did. They call the right person instead of pretending to be the right person. They offer a real alternative instead of a soft dismissal. And when they fail, which will happen in any human place, they leave enough evidence to repair the harm instead of arguing about whether it occurred. On the ride home, Daniel thought about the thin line between policy and character. Policy is what you print. Character is what you do when the scanner is down and the clock is loud and someone wants the easy win. The ending he wanted for his airline wasn't dramatic. It was durable. A culture where a woman with a pill pouch and a name on a boarding pass didn't have to perform gratitude to keep what she paid for. A place where respect wasn't granted from the top of the aisle but practiced at eye level, one beep at a time. That, in the end, was the solution. Simple steps done every time by people who remember that dignity is not a perk. The poster would fade a little under the lights. The ink would soften. The promise would hold because enough hands kept it. And somewhere, at some gate with no camera on it, a scanner would sing, a seat would remain, and a story that could have gone wrong would quietly go right. 2A is not a perk. It is a promise. It stands for a simple moral law. Every person carries an equal claim to dignity, and systems exist to protect that claim, not to negotiate it away. In this story, the word appropriate tried to redraw the border, and schedule tried to rush the passport check. One quiet beep scan, verify put the line back where it belonged. That is the heart of it. Respect is not a mood we offer when convenient. It is a duty we perform when pressure is loud and eyes are on the clock. Dignity is inherent, not earned. Eleanor did not need to be remarkable, fast, grateful, or quiet to deserve her seat. Human worth travels with the person, not with their usefulness to the timetable. Equal respect requires equal proof. When evidence is applied unevenly, respect turns into charity. When evidence is applied equally, respect becomes justice. Procedure done right is simply respect made public. Scanning, verifying, and recording are not cold steps. They are warm promises that no one's story will be edited by someone else's hurry. Respect is also concrete for older bodies. Inches are not luxury. They are medicine for knees that swell, backs that lock, lungs that need room to breathe. To meet age at eye level is not favoritism. It is fairness. And it prevents quiet harms that never make headlines but linger for days. Power, finally, must be stewarded rather than performed. Daniel chose moving right over moving fast. Leadership is not the art of winning arguments. It is the courage to slow a system until truth can be safely heard. Here is the ethic made actionable. Pause once. A single breath interrupts the bias that hurry smuggles in. 2. Evidence before ego. Let the machine sing, scan, verify, record, especially when the line is long. Speak at eye level. Use plain language. Name the reason. Invite consent. Courtesy without clarity is camouflage. 4. Offer real alternatives. If a change must be proposed, make it specific, safe, and optional. 5. Designed for failure. When the scanner dies, character is your manual, paper manifest, a supervisor call, and permission for any employee to slow the train for the truth. 6. Repair precisely. If harm occurs, apologize for the exact thing, log the fact, and fix the pattern, not just the moment. The heroism here is deliberately small. A beep, an image saved, a seatbelt clicking like a period. That is how trust is mended through tiny, auditable acts repeated by ordinary people on tired Tuesdays. If we keep choosing the beep over the story, evidence over hunch, clarity over hurry, we do more than resolve incidents. We protect the fragile thread that lets strangers travel together without fear of being diminished for being old, slow, uncertain, or simply human. Carry this forward. Respect is standard equipment. Begin with breath. Reach for proof. Meet people at eye level. Write the why. When systems go dark, let conscience carry the light. Breathe. Scan. Verify. Record. Repair. Respect every time. Because dignity is never a favor to be granted. It is a right already paid for by the fact of being human. Thank you for watching this video to the end. If you're new here, or you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe today so you don't miss the next honest, warm, and useful stories. I'd love to hear from you. Has a scan, verify, respect moment ever changed the tone at work or at home? Leave a brief, gentle comment. Your story could be a light for someone else. See you in the next video, where we'll keep gathering small, valuable lessons so we step into the world each day with more clarity, more fairness, and more kindness.